As we count down the days, okay, let's just be honest, the seconds, until Donald Trump is finally removed from the White House. It's 20 days, and you do the math on the seconds for those of you who weren't counting. We're seeing Trump flailing around, making every attempt to remain in office. It's not only that he wants to remain president, but he also knows what's waiting for him on the other side, and it ain't good. Without the presidency, he can no longer invoke absolute immunity from lawsuits and investigations that he leaned so heavily on these past 4 years. And the investigations, well, they're piling up. There's the investigation into hush money payments he made to a porn star and a Playboy bunny who claimed to have had affairs with him. There are tax and fraud investigations against him and the Trump Organization over accusations of improperly valuing assets to secure loans and get tax benefits. There are defamation lawsuits from 2 women who accused Trump of sexually assaulting them. His own niece, Mary Trump, is suing him and his siblings over a multi-million-dollar inheritance dispute. And former tenants are suing him and the Trump family over a decade-long fraud of manipulating the cost of apartment improvements in order to raise their rents. And those are just some of the legal troubles facing Trump when he's no longer president. Joining me now is Glenn Kirshner, a former federal prosecutor. And Glenn, as I watched these pardons come through, and this is element 3 for my team here, as I watched Trump pardoning these awful people, let's just be honest. Paul Manafort, who was accused of conspiracy against the United States, Alexander Van der Swan, and George Papadopoulos, who helped Russia go into our election, corrupt politicians, go on and on and on. Duncan Hunter, Steve Stockman, I think he's the one who stole from Medicare. On and on and on. And the war criminals. I'm thinking to myself, at least on some of these, did he set himself up for the Stones and Manaforts and Van der Swans and Papadopouloses to become witnesses for the prosecution in New York?
You know, it's not such a simple question to answer, Joy. The prevailing wisdom is that if you get a pardon, your Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination is extinguished. It no longer exists because you can't incriminate yourself. You've been pardoned. Here's the thing. Really accomplished defense attorneys will argue, you know what, he got a presidential pardon. What does that cover? It covers federal crimes, but it doesn't cover state crimes. So, for example, we know Manafort was charged by New York with state crimes because of New York's unique and now rescinded double jeopardy law. That got thrown out because he'd already been prosecuted federally. But most defense attorneys will make the argument that a federal pardon is all well and good, but my client retains his Fifth Amendment rights in connection with any state crimes he may have committed.
Well, on that point, just really quickly, because, you know, I hear your point, but, you know, Andrew Cuomo, the guy that Trump would have to beg for a pardon from after he threatened New York and said he was going to take all New York's money away for COVID, which is fun. Andrew Cuomo signed a law back in 2019 that was aimed at weakening Trump's pardon power, at least ability to carry it over to the state. It ended the double jeopardy loophole. So it closed the double jeopardy legal loophole that protects individuals who are pardoned by a president from being prosecuted at the state level. Does that weaken Manafort's and his lawyers' potential argument?
Oh, it absolutely does, because that's why the New York state charges got thrown out the first time around. But that case, that law no longer exists, as you just mentioned, Joy. So if I were the prosecutors in New York, I would re-bring that case. And I would say, Judge, it is a new legal landscape, and it's a new day for Paul Manafort, and he needs to be held accountable for the crimes he committed against New York State.
Yeah. Let's talk about this New York prosecutor, what he's doing. So Cy Vance, who, by the way, he's up for re-election, and I don't know if he's going to run again, but that's going to be the most interesting election, I think, in America, other than Georgia, after Georgia. But anywho, he's still in charge right now. He's hired this forensic accounting firm. He initially opened his investigation, per the Washington Post, in 2018 to examine the alleged hush money payments made to Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal, who's the Playboy bunny. The probe expanded, and it now does include the Trump Organization activities, potentials for bank, tax, and insurance fraud. How threatening do you think that case is to Donald Trump's freedom?
Well, you know, it's a sure sign when prosecutors begin to hire forensic experts. It is a sure sign they are moving toward charging somebody and going to trial. You don't begin to spend the limited resources. I know everybody thinks prosecutors' offices have these, deep pockets and unlimited resources. Not exactly the case. But when I saw Cy Vance beginning to hire forensic accounting firms to help unravel, expose, and explain Donald Trump's financial fraud schemes, that was a sure indication that they are moving to the next stage, and the next stage is almost certainly going to be indictment on criminal charges and trial.
And lastly, I know that this bothered you as much as it bothered me and a lot of other people, these Blackwater Iraq contractors. You've now had the Geneva Conventions, the United Nations actually object to them, saying the Geneva Conventions oblige states to hold war criminals accountable for their crimes, even when they act as private security contractors. This is UN experts. They said these pardons violate U.S. obligations under international law and more broadly undermine humanitarian law and human rights at a global level. Is there anything internationally that can be done about the fact that these four men, killed, basically slaughtered a bunch of Iraqi civilians, including a 9-year-old? Is there any recourse that the international, sort of legal community has?
It's not likely that we're going to see Donald Trump, hauled off to an international court, tried for his crimes. But I do think that this should impress upon the incoming administration the need to hold a president accountable, a president who has been violating laws, both foreign and domestic, because, as you say, a UN panel said that these pardons violate international law. In a very real sense, Joy, this feels like Donald Trump acting as an accessory after the fact to war crimes, because the law of accessory after the fact simply says if you know somebody committed a crime against the United States and you assist them in avoiding punishment, you committed the federal felony of accessory after the fact. I'm not saying that Donald Trump could be legally charged with that crime, because people are going to say that his pardon power is so broad. But, as sure as I'm sitting here, he violated the spirit of the accessory after the fact law when he pardoned war criminals.
Glenn Kirshner, who I think a lot of people have on their fantasy list of potential attorneys general, kind of wish that was the name that was coming up. We'd all be like, hell yeah, if that was happening. Glenn Kirshner, if they call you, you have to call us first, and we want you to come on and tell us you're going to be in the AG's office. Appreciate you, man. Have a great,
you'll be the
happy
first time I drop,
Up next,
Joy.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Up next, as we